everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to be doing a video on sanding. Now I know that seems a little basic, but it's necessary. And it isn't really basic. When you're sanding a piece down to bare wood and you want to stain it, you want the most beautiful, flawless finish to apply that stain to. You don't want to have to deal with anything that is going to show up and cause you to have blotchiness or flaws. And so we're going to talk about different sandpapers today. Not all sandpapers are created equal either. I've tested them all out, just so you know. Also, I'll feature a couple of my sanders. I have two that I use on a regular basis. I have since retired my very first one, but it is a very economical choice, and I'm going to show you all three that I have in my shop. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started sanding. I've got 4 pieces to sand today, so we're just going to showcase one in this video. And I'm going to go over all the things so you guys are very clear how to get the most beautiful finish out of your piece. Let's start with equipment. This is the first piece I want to show you guys. This is my Festool CT MIDI dust collection system. Now, not everybody's going to need to have this. It is fantastic to have. I didn't even have this until early last year when I invested in it. And I say invested because it is a big investment, but I do this every day, so it's phenomenal. I do have a video, I believe, on my channel featuring the Festool, so I'm not going to go too much in detail, but here it is here. It's a HEPA dust collection system, and it works inside fabulous. The top there, when I popped it open, is sitting my Mirka Deros sander. I leave this one pretty much hooked up all the time because it is the one that gets most use. This is my 5-inch Orbital that gets used for most every project. Anything flat, I use the Mirka Deros. Now I say that because I have another sander that I want to show you. So this is what it looks like up close. This is the Mirka Deros 5.0 5-inch Orbital sander. Now I chose this one when I was doing my research for purchasing over the Festool Orbital sander because it worked for me. Hasn't let me down. It is a workhorse of a sander. It is an investment. These tools I'm showing you today are expensive, but I do have a more affordable option that I used in the very beginning. I'm going to show you that one. Now the next one I have over here is my Surf Prep sander. Now this is more what I use it for, a finish sander. It's built differently. It is a rectangle. It is a beautiful sander for finishing. And when I say finishing, if I needed to sand down this edge here, if I use that flat Orbital sander, it's going to destroy this detail. If I use my Surf Prep, they have all of these different pads. See how squishy this is? This will fit right onto an edge like this, sand it down to bare wood without losing all of this detail. So this is an excellent sander for that. Now you can use it to sand flat surfaces as well. I don't, just because I feel like my Mirka is a faster sander for that, and when I'm working on a flat surface, I go with the Orbital all day long. Both of these hook into my dust collection system, and this is my DeWalt sander that I got started with. It is a variable speed 5-inch Orbital sander, and it is a lot more of an economical choice, and it works really, really well. I retired that when I bought my Mirka. But there is nothing wrong with this sander. I used this for years. You see it doesn't have the bag on it because I used to connect that with a hose up to my vacuum. Now that's a whole nother thing. I have the dust collection by Festool, but you can get a hose and put these to a regular shop vac to also minimize dust. It's not as great, but it's a lot better than not. So we've talked about sanders. Let's go ahead and talk about sandpaper for a minute. Now I mentioned in the earlier segment, not all sandpaper is created equal, and that's absolutely true. I have tried from Ace Hardware, Home Depot, to Harbor Freight, to woodworking stores, and I have learned in my experience what works best for me are 2 brands in particular. One of them is the Abranet, which this is a Mirka product, but it is fabulous. I get the most out of my Abranet sanding screens versus some of the other sandpapers. Now, when I can't get the Abranet because sometimes it's sold out, or maybe my local woodworking store just doesn't have what I need, then I go to this, which is the Pro Sand. This is another really great brand. So this is my first choice, Abranet. Second choice would be the Pro Sand. I have tried so many other sandpapers and just flung through the discs because either they gum up, they tear, they don't stay adhered to the sander itself. multitude of issues. And our featured piece today, it is a French provincial dresser. Yes, it has already been painted. That is my method. Paint first, sand and stain last. So what I want to tell you is there are different types of tops. Not everything is solid wood. There's such thing as wood veneer. That's what I believe this piece to be, and sometimes it's really hard to tell. When you're working with a wood veneer though, you want to err on the side of caution and not go as aggressive with your sandpaper grit, because if you burn through, then you burn through the finish and it's not going to be pretty. Before I start my sanding job is come to the back. That's where we're at now, the back of the dresser. Here, this darker line here that's sitting on top of this wood kind of gives me an indication that this may be a wood veneer piece. Now, not always is that the case. Sometimes it can just be a little deceiving the way that it's been finished. But what I normally do is I come to the back of the piece and I take a look. Before we dive in, what sandpaper grit am I starting with? Here's my formula. I learned this from a woodworker and it has worked for me ever since, and I've always stuck with it. I start with 80 or 100. 80 if I'm solid wood, 100 if I'm not sure or it's veneer. Then I go up to 120, 150, and I end at 180. Anything finer than 180 grit sandpaper may have an effect on how your stain imparts to the wood. You don't want to go too terribly fine. 180 is plenty fine and smooth enough. So that's what I start with. Stop for just a minute to zoom in and show you guys what's going on. So as you can see, there's multiple layers here to this. There's that funky yellow. Underneath that, there's another one, and then there's a white, and then we have the bare wood. Now, as you'll see, I'm not concentrating on getting off the entire finish and having it look absolutely beautiful with my first grit of sandpaper. The idea of working up through the grits is to help you remove the layers on the surface, but also to make sure that you don't have any swirl marks, too much pressure going on that will cause some dents or fluctuations in the wood. You want to make sure that you stay very flat with your sander, going back and forth. You can go around in circles in motion, it doesn't matter, but you just want to stay flat. You want to make sure your sander isn't jumping around. The other thing you want to do is make sure that you're not trying to get off every single last bit of the finish with your first grit of sandpaper. It'll all come off. We're going to be switching grits about 4 times, so you will get the most beautiful finish if you don't try to remove the entire thing with one grit. Show you guys, I wanted to take this off and show you guys, when I was talking about gumming up, this is what I'm talking about, where it gets kind of gummed up or gooked up. There is 3 layers on this above the wood though, so I expected that because we've got some sort of a manufacturer painted finish. There's a gray color and then there's a white color, so I kind of expected that this would happen. I've done so many of these French pieces like this. This is not coming off very easily, but I'm also going a little less aggressive using 100 grit, so I'm having to work a little bit harder. The key is, like I said, to keep you can move it as much as you want around, keeping it flat, not making sure that you don't go dip up and down or move it around. I am now going to switch though to my piece of 120. You can see I left a lot of stuff behind, and again, because the goal is really not to get everything off completely with your first grit. So I've got half of the dresser done. I figured even in fast motion, you guys don't need to see me do the whole entire top. What I wanted to do was go through the grits with you, show you the beginning, middle, and end. So this is what I was talking about. So we have this layer, then we have another layer, and we have another layer. So it didn't surprise me that it did kind of gook up a little bit on the sandpaper. That can happen when you've got multiple layers, especially of this type of manufacturer finish that's on there with these French dressers. Anyway, here is the final. I am stopping at 150. Now I told you that you could go to 180. It doesn't mean you have to. A lot of times I will stop at 150 if I feel like it's smooth enough, and this is smooth as butter. So it is fine for me. I'm good with 150. What I wanted to, when I do my 150 or my 180, my last grit, what I do is go over it several times, as you guys saw. I kept sweeping across it. Even though it was perfectly sanded smooth, what I'm looking for is to make sure that there aren't any coil or swirl marks in my surface, and that can happen sometimes if you apply too much pressure, for one, and for two, if you use a piece of sandpaper that's got that gook or little spots stuck in it. Those spots will swirl around and they can cause these little marks. So I was looking to make sure I had absolutely none of those, and I do not. So I am ready for stain. That is it. We are at the end of the video. I will be staining this off camera, and I will show you the final result at the very end in a photo, but that is not part of this video. It's not a stain video. I wanted to concentrate today on the sanding process. So just to recap, I used my Abernet sanding discs. I also like the Pro Sand if I'm out of Abernet. They're just my preference. I will link everything down below so you guys can go take a look and go shopping and see what things cost and try them out for yourself. Today we used the Mirka Deros 5.0 sander, Orbital sander. That is my sander of choice. It's the one I use pretty much every day. But I'm also going to link the DeWalt, because if you're just getting started, that is a fantastic economical choice for an Orbital sander. I used it for years before I ever got my big investment of my Mirka. Then I wanted to also talk about the surf prep, because as you get into doing this more, if you do more detailed pieces with embellishments, round legs, anything where a flat sander will take down the design, you would want to use something like a finish sander like the Surf Prep, which I have a discount code, and I will also put the link down below for you guys. It is a great, great sander. It's not one that I use as much as I use my Orbital sander, but I still use it quite often, and it's fantastic. So I started with 100 grit sandpaper because of the fact that I am working with a wood veneer. I like to err on the side of caution and go a little bit higher up in my grit. If I knew 100% that something is solid wood, I do start with something a little bit rougher like an 80 grit. It will help you not to have to work as hard, and it will take down that finish a little bit easier. But I didn't want to do that on a veneer piece. I showed you guys looking at the back of a piece sometimes can give you an indication whether it's solid wood or veneer. There's many ways. Sometimes style is indicative whether or not it's a veneer or solid wood. A lot of the times, and I'm not going to say every time because I have done solid pieces that are French, but a lot of the times they are a veneer top because of the design of them. The other thing that you can do to tell is anytime you've got any kind of a fancy wood design on the top, where maybe you've got some triangles meeting or patterns, that's indicative of a wood veneer. Typically those are not solid wood. That would be so incredibly expensive and time consuming to create something like that. It's easier and cheaper for companies to create a wood veneer with a design like that. So whenever there's a design or patterns in the top, you can almost bet that it is a veneer. So we went over that just so you guys can kind of get a beginning as to how do I figure that out. Took me a long time. So just because a piece is heavy doesn't mean it's solid. So anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video today. I will list everything that we talked about in the video down below, including what grits of sandpaper to use and the process in which you want to use them. I call it my sandpaper formula. It's really not a formula, it's just something that I stick to over the years. So I go from 100, 120, 150, and I feel like if I need it, I will do the 180. If I don't, 150 is plenty good enough for some species of woods. So there it is there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you guys being subscribers. Keep subscribing so you can get all of my videos and be a part of my YouTube community. It helps support my channel and it keeps me going. Now, if this wasn't enough information, I do teach one-on-ones virtually and in person. So if this video was not detailed enough for you, I do try to keep them short and informational for my YouTube channel. But I teach one-on-ones. So I'm going to put the link here to my website if you guys are interested. I offer 30 and 60-minute lessons. Like I said, they are virtual or in person, and they can be geared towards whatever you want to learn. Thank you again for joining me, and I'll catch you on the next video.